Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to hop on today's webinar. We know you're all extremely busy, therefore we really appreciate it. Today, you're going to hear from Justin Kerrigan, Director of Athletics at Liberty Hill ISD. In today's webinar, he'll be answering frequently asked questions regarding personal branding and social media during the recruitment process. During the webinar, feel free to type any questions you have into the chat and we'll get to them at the end. Justin, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Saxon. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, just wanted to say thank you to all the coaches who hopped on. I know we probably will have some joining us throughout, and also I know a lot of people are eagerly waiting for the recording as well. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to type them into the chat, and we will get to them at the end. But we will start off with some Q&A. Starting with some basic ones on what coaches are looking for. Justin, what are the key elements of a strong personal brand that grabs a coach's attention in the recruitment process?
Yeah, I want to hit on a couple things first. One, most important, there's a common saying in life, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And in the world of recruiting and what we're talking about today with social media, that couldn't be further from the truth. And so one thing with social media is that's going to be your first impression. A lot of times for somebody to try to notice you and watch your film and get their first glimpse of who you are. And then when you meet in person, the second time, that's your second chance for a first impression. And everything from your social media needs to line up with who you are in real life. And some of that comes into with just the stats, the numbers, height, weight, things of that nature. And I want to make sure I hit that up front, that what you are on social media is also who you are in real life. And then from there, they got to match up. So sorry to derail there at the beginning, but that was a big one I wanted to make sure I hit.
Awesome. Going off of that, what are some common mistakes that athletes make when setting up their personal brand or social media?
Yeah, I think it kind of falls into what's good and what's bad all in the same question. Is for one, make sure that you have accurate information in there. Make sure, I'm going to use the word professional, but not every high school kid really quite understands what that means as us as professionals look at it. So think appropriate. Make sure that the information that you have on your page is appropriate. That your name is your legal name or whatever it is you go by, that it should also match what your name is in your Huddle account. And then whenever I Google you, right, because I want to see what other sports you might play and find what other information is out there. When I Google you, I'm Googling the appropriate name that's in your social media account. So make sure that all that stuff's appropriate. Where you get into the don'ts is you have a silly handle, your Twitter handle or something like that. You have something silly or inappropriate in there. The things that you engage with, the pages and the people that you follow, you got to make sure that stuff is going to be appropriate. Again, who's your audience? So all this stuff kind of goes back to what's your objective, who's your target audience. Obviously, it's going to be college coaches. So you want to make sure that your website, not your website, but your social media page, you're following the appropriate people and you're engaging with the appropriate audience. And if you have two separate accounts, that's okay. That if you have one that's just more towards your recruiting, that's okay. But then with that, if you have a personal one, you also want to make sure that that's your brand as well. All right. So if I see your recruiting Twitter account, that needs to line up a little bit with who you are in your personal one as well. And again, the same things apply there, just as far as who you follow, who you engage with. Most importantly, is that you as the student athlete are running your social media. It's your brand. It's not mom or dad's or grandparents' brand, right? They have those dreams for you, but it's yours. It's who you are. And authenticity is most important. And, it's as a college coach, it's very easy to see when dad or mom are running the social media account and also trying to engage with you. And that's just not appropriate. And it's not a good first impression.
Awesome. And that's a really great note about, the engagement piece, especially with X or Twitter. Coaches can see what these athletes are liking and, what posts they're retweeting. So definitely something to keep in mind, but that's awesome. Going off of social media, what social media platforms are most relevant for connecting with coaches?
Twitter seems to be the big one. That's where you get on a lot of college websites where you go to the coaches and you can kind of see who they are, what their title is. A lot of them have in there with their email, what's their Twitter handle or their X handle now. That seems to be the biggest one, where the most amount of recruiting takes place, or also where you're going to see the most amount of student athletes kind of trying to promote themselves, which is okay. I know Instagram is really big for the younger audience, high school kids. I don't know that that's where all the college coaches are. So again, if you just kind of go to the college coaches on their websites and you look, and if it's got their X handle, it's probably going to be where they're living as well. That's the world that they're kind of also doing their own branding, right? As a coach and as a program, they're probably on all the platforms, but if they have a handle on their website, that's where it's going to be most advantageous to engage with them.
Right. So as a coach who's on, either X or Instagram, what are they looking for? What kind of content on their profiles is what stands out to these coaches? What makes them enticing for them?
I think ultimately it's going to come down to when I come across your profile, if I'm scrolling and the video on there captures my attention, right? And then we're going to kind of derail here a little bit, but the video captures my attention, right? That first play, that second play, did you keep me long enough to get to a third play or a fourth play, right? And now you've got attention, right? Now what's the rest of your story? And then that's where you kind of go into, do you have the academics, right? All that stuff, is it readily available? Again, as you kind of go back to the social media profile, right? What all information do you have in your profile, right? And make sure that, again, we talked about, your actual name, your legal name, whatever it is you go by, your height, weight, make sure that is accurate with who you are. That's the one thing that no matter what, I think for eternity, everybody thinks they're taller than what they are. The weight generally is going to add up. Like that's going to be pretty accurate when you meet somebody. But what you put down as your height on your social media, in your program, all that stuff needs to actually be what you really are, not what you want to be, not what you wish you were. And no matter what, there's always going to be some debates going on with that. That you have your huddle link, all of the film in there, and your social media, at least in your bio portion of it, where you're located, test scores if you have them, other sports that you might play, accolades that you may have received, which would also include any kind of rankings that you may have. There's a lot of things, but cut to the chase, the number one thing is, how do you play on the field, right? When you're trying to capture somebody's attention, or on the court, or whatever sport you might do, right? That when somebody's scrolling social media and you just happen to come across somebody's stuff, right? Is the information there is going to capture their attention? Are you putting the stuff there that it's your elevator pitch, it's your 30 seconds, right? Can you capture somebody's attention in that short period of time? Same thing that if you're posting stuff or sending it to somebody directly, right? I think it's important to have an elevator pitch. Again, quick bullet points. What's going to save time? How do I capture this person's attention for a very short period of time? Because Lord knows we don't have a whole lot of time to scroll through a whole bunch of stuff. Right, capturing their attention. Make sure you have a good elevator pitch.
Awesome. And I know some of these coaches might be new to recruiting. So kind of flipping the script for a second, how can coaches leverage social media to find that kind of athletes that they're looking for?
Are you referring to how like college coaches?
Yeah, probably college coaches, joining the recruiting process.
Well, that's a tough one. I'm going to first say the most important thing in the recruiting process is the high school coach. Obviously, being in the state of Texas, we are big believers in Texas high school football. But I don't want to say that any college coach out there should be searching social media for a recruit. If you come across one, awesome. I don't know of a way to really search for one in the social media world. I think as maybe you're looking up information and looking up stats and looking up results. So if you're track or swim or, an individual sport and you're looking through results, then you gather some information, kind of identify, some prospects. And then as you Google them, you come across, when you do a Google search, you're going to come across whatever social media accounts they have, right? And you start going from there and then making sure from that, that person that you saw a time on, or whatever it is they may have accomplished in their event, that then now you start kind of going through their social media and seeing if they're a fit for you, and you're kind of working backwards that way. But ultimately, you start with the coaches who are with those student athletes every day.
Right. And something you mentioned on the last question, you talked a little bit about, test scores and academics. How important are academics in the recruiting process for these coaches?
Well, naturally, I mean, the student athlete's got to be able to get into your institution, and then also be eligible, whether it be NAIA or NCAA. And then within the NCAA, there's different requirements for different levels. So Division One FBS, if you're wanting to go to TCU or Texas, Georgia, Alabama, the NCAA has got a standard that you have to meet. And Division Two is a little bit different. Division Three a little bit different. NAIA different. Junior college different. And so the key is making sure that you understand where it is you want to go. Naturally, 99.9% of student athletes in high school want to go to the top level that they can get to. That needs to be your bar, right? What does it take to be an NCAA eligible student athlete, right? That's got to be your minimum, right? And then I want to overshoot that. For each institution, where do I want to get a degree from? Obviously, that's most important. The degree that you get from a lot of these schools will also determine your potential income down the road. And if you have that kind of broad picture approach as a young student athlete, kudos to you. But you need to be able to identify what are the standards that I need to make. What do I need to get to? What's the minimum of where it is I'm trying to go, right? And then you want to obviously overshoot that, because again, there's competition involved. So you want to be able to go beyond the minimum standards, but understanding what's your target is really important.
Right. Staying on that kind of topic, are there specific qualities or experiences or accolades outside of sport that coaches value when they look at someone's, social media or personal brand that helps make them stand out?
Well, I think authenticity is really important. Obviously, it needs to be good, and who you are. Everybody wants somebody that's a great team player, right? And sometimes that's being a great leader. Sometimes that's just being a great teammate. And you can see a lot of things within social media and how people engage and interact with one another, right? What kind of person are they? Who are they amongst their friends? Are they bringing something positive to their group, and whatever that is? And to me, that's one of the most important and most valuable things, is what are you going to bring to the team when you walk into that locker room? Who are you? Are you going to be somebody that is going to bring something positive, whether it just be your energy, how you practice every day? It doesn't all have to be things that happen in a game, but who you are and what you bring is important, and being a great teammate. Even when you talk in individual sports, right? Because most all of them have a team concept to them somewhere along the way. What you are and who you are in the locker room greatly impacts the morale and the spirit of the team, and that's important.
Great. Kind of keeping along the same lines. On the athlete social media pages, are there any info that athletes should not keep? I know we kind of touched a little bit on general mistakes, but is there any general, things in their bio or that can hurt them in the recruiting process?
Just inappropriate stuff is, I think, the things that would hurt them. That you and again, you want to make sure that what you have is accurate. If you put in your bio that you're a 6'2", 210-pound wide receiver who runs a 4.3, and that is not accurate, you're 6 foot and you're 190 and you run a 4.5, those are really good numbers still. But when I show up and I see you and I expected a 6'2", 210, 4.3, and now you're 6 foot, 190, 4.5, you've crushed what I thought I was walking in to see, and have changed my perception, right? And that doesn't mean that that individual is not good and not a high quality athlete, but you feel like you've been lied to. And again, you go back to the authenticity. If the individual says, "Hey, I'm 6 foot, I'm 190, I run a 4.5," now as I evaluate, I'm looking at a 6 foot, 190, 4.5 athlete. How does that individual fit, right? And that's completely different than what was in their bio, right? Although that sounds great. So you can go from being a great athlete and recruitable individual, but you sold something different, and it just changes the perception of who you are unintentionally, right? And that coach could overlook you now as a possible recruit, even though you're quality. But if that coach walks in knowing exactly what they're going to see and then it matches, right, there's a greater opportunity for success for that student athlete. So again, I'm going to go back to just making sure that you have accurate information and appropriate for who your target audience is, and understanding that, and when you know or have an idea of what audience you want. So again, maybe you look at what level coaches you're trying to approach. And again, we all think Power 5 as we talk football, but all sports, you're thinking that top level. Go follow those coaches, see what they like, see what they engage with, right? And now you're going to start to find out in a blueprint of what do you need to present.
Awesome. I think what you touched on there is at the end is the perfect segue into kind of the do's and don'ts of coach contact. So what would you say is the best way to reach out to a coach for the first time?
You got to go back to that elevator pitch. You want to make sure that you're conscious of their time. A college football coach is a college anything coach, any sport, is working tremendous hours, and a lot of times is not going to spend a tremendous amount of time on social media, right? If they're there, they're just looking for maybe some of their recruits that they're actively on and checking them, right? And so if there's a DM in there that you sent them, you got 5 seconds of their attention, right? And you need to captivate it as best you can with truthful information and be point blank specific. Here's who I am. Here's my intangibles, right? And any accolades that you may have obviously will help grab their attention. If you're a 3-star, 4-star, whatever ranking in all state, those kind of things help kind of grab a little bit of attention. The other thing too, there's a personal piece. If you do any research on the individual that you are sending a message to, there's a way to connect in them. Again, this needs to be brief because you're not going to have a whole lot of their time, but if you can connect with that individual on a personal level, you got a better chance of engagement. Also, you need to know, who should I be contacting, right? If it's football, the head football coach, probably not getting that person, right? You're probably not grabbing their attention, right? Is it the offensive coordinator? Maybe not them either, right? If this is your first time engaging with somebody on that staff, look online, try to find somebody, if they have posted, who's the recruiter responsible for your area. That'd be one area to start. Which coach coaches your position? Another place to start. If they have their auxiliary staff and there's their recruiting department, analysts, any of those kind of personnel as well, tremendous place to start, because those people are going to engage more, because that's part of their job, right? Is to identify and find talent that maybe the full-time coach or the position coach, the coordinator, maybe doesn't have time to go research and do all of that. So again, pick the correct target, an appropriate target for where it is you're trying to go, and you'll have a greater chance of engaging with the coach.
Great. All these coaches are so busy, and that's why, I think these clinics are so helpful for them as well. So if an athlete hasn't heard back from a coach, should they send a follow-up email? And if so, how should they approach it?
Well, I think the question is how bad do you want it? How bad do you want to go to that school, right? How bad do you want to play for that program? And you got to ask yourself some of that. And if this is a place that I want to go and that's a place that I want to play, well, then why would you stop trying to contact them? Maybe that's not the correct coach or the appropriate coach to contact. Maybe that coach isn't real active on social media. Go to the next one. That coach may not check their DMs. There's plenty of them that don't do that. Go to the next one, right? And you don't want to get to the point where you're annoying, but at the end of the day, you're also trying to accomplish something, and you want to make sure you're mindful of somebody else's time, right? That you're not just bombarding them. Go to the next one the next week. Somebody else that may fit, right? Either your position, your side of the ball, right? Again, talk baseball, pitching coach, a hitting coach, whatever it may be. You find your coach that maybe you can connect with. Maybe you find a lower level graduate assistant, analyst, recruiting person, whatever it is, and you just keep working. If that's a place that you want to go to, you got to figure out, where can you connect and get in. Don't always go back with the same exact thing. That's just redundant, right? So if the first one did not capture any attention, change your approach slightly. Again, you don't want to deviate too far from who you are. But your last elevator pitch didn't connect. So maybe try a different starting line as far as your intro. Again, keep it short, sweet, who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, and you go from there. I don't ever want to tell somebody to give up on their dreams. So if that's where you want to go, keep trying, find a different avenue.
Great. So a lot of people can find coaches' emails online on their, school page. Are emails just an effective way or more effective than social media, or does it kind of depend on the situation?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the situation and who you're dealing with. If you're dealing with an older generation coach, probably email, right? That's the stuff that they get and they're going to check and they're going to do. And there's also a solid chance an older coach may not run their social media account. There may be somebody else on their staff that's kind of monitoring that for them and putting information out and, kind of running that on their behalf, maybe with their oversight. And so you may not get engagement on some of that stuff. So maybe email is a better way to go. You also got to be mindful that, one time when I was a head coach in college, you're getting hundreds of emails a day. And a lot of times you don't catch them all, right? And if as you're reading it, you don't know that person and you don't know the subject and it doesn't really pertain to your current job, what you're doing at the moment, you may scroll past that one. That's a tough one. Again, I'm going to go back to how bad do you want it? And then you find another approach. And if that coach doesn't respond to an email, move on to the next one. You don't want to annoy one particular coach, but if you move from one to another, well, they'll never know, right? So find a different approach. If one's not working, go a different route. Whether it be email or social media, it's just going to depend on the person. You'll never know that. So try them all.
Awesome. And talking about a little bit of kind of the red flags or mistakes people make with, their social media profiles or their personal branding, what are some red flags to avoid when contacting a coach? Maybe something they shouldn't put in that email or that DM.
Well, I think for one, first let me go back and I'll kind of touch on this, the last thing we talked about. If you're overdoing it to the same individual, they're going to get annoyed with you. They're going to know who you are and they're going to try to avoid that. So bombarding them with the same thing on repeat. Also, copy and paste, not good. Right. And as you're talking about emails or even DMs, you copy and paste and the same thing's going to each coach, each place. It's very stale. A lot of times it's easy to see. And then there's a significant number of times there's a mistake, right? You reference the wrong coach or the wrong school in your message and you're immediately done at that point. So you got to be mindful of that. Make sure that you're contacting the appropriate person with specific information and keep it short and sweet and make sure the main thing is the main thing and you're trying to sell who you are, whatever attributes that may be that fit for your sport and keep it short, sweet, simple, and to the point. And again, it's okay to have an introductory line and try to connect with the individual in there. Don't overdo it with a coach. If you're not engaging with that one, move on to another one.
Awesome. We got a question from the chat about who is the best person to reach out first. So if an athlete was to approach the first coach, is it the director of recruiting? Is it the coach? Is it, recruits in their area? What would you say the best approach for their initial reach out would be?
That's a great question. And every place is different. Every sport's different. I would generally start on the bottom and kind of work your way up from there. The odds that you're going to get a head coach are pretty slim. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. It'll happen. Someone will engage with you for sure. But the lower level, as you talk about, and I shouldn't say lower level, but different titles, recruiting coordinators, for sure start there. Right? That's their job. They don't want to overlook somebody that may end up signing at a competitor, right? Your rival, or even a higher level, whatever it may be, right? So it's their job to identify talent, and that's a great place to start. And I don't know if I'm answering your question, but you know, starting at the appropriate level is good. And again, if you can continue to work your way up and continue to get engagement, even better.
Awesome. No, I think that's great. And then kind of shifting gears a little bit, we haven't talked about parents in terms of the recruiting process, which I'm sure can be a tricky situation. Jason in the chat asked, do I need to tell my players that are getting recruited to make sure their parents are watching what they do on social media as well? Do you find that that is helpful to have coaches, you know, or sorry, parents having a watchful eye over their athletes or kids' social media as well?
Having a watchful eye, absolutely. Being involved or actively participating, no. A huge red flag. Again, coaches want to recruit the kid. They want to build a relationship with the student athlete, and that's a big part of the recruiting process. And then finding out whether we're a fit. Right? Are you a fit for our program, and are we a fit for you personally? Right? That's a big part of it. It's a two-way street, and I think a lot of times student athletes lose sight of that. You're evaluating and recruiting those colleges as much as they're recruiting you, and making sure that both sides gel and mesh together well. The parents are involved. Coaches want to build relationships with the parents, but there's an appropriate time for that, appropriate interactions for that. That piece of the recruiting process is vital. You want to have a great relationship with mom, dad, grandma, whoever it is that's in the student athlete's life. That's important. But the engagement piece needs to be authentic, which means it needs to come from the student athlete. So it's okay for a parent to have a watchful eye on the social media, but do not misrepresent your son or daughter and try to take over on their behalf. That's the fastest way to ruin it.
No, I think that's a really good note and something really helpful for parents just to kind of maybe sit back and let their kid take the reins on that. And
Well, the thing is, Saxon, sorry to cut you off, but
yeah,
like
no problem.
parents, they don't want their child to fail, which I get. I got two myself. So parents don't want their child to fail. They want to make sure they're doing everything they can for them to be successful, to capture their dreams. Right. And as parents, we live vicariously through our kids a little bit that way. And sometimes we just lose sight of what's important. And the important thing is for your child, your son or daughter, to have the experience of some personal growth through the process and learning how to communicate in a different way than what they're used to, because they're dealing with college coaches for the first time. And it's a great learning opportunity. Don't steal that from your son or daughter.
I think that's great and a really good note on that. We did get a follow-up question on the last one in our direct messages. Should the athletes tell their parents to follow the same rules as far as watching what they put on social media? Does that ever affect the player negatively?
Pretty rare. I mean, the parents got to be doing some outlandish stuff. At the end of the day, for the most part, and every program is different, every school is different, every coaching staff's different, so you never know. You know, the institution that you're going to, you know, some of them are under a more scrutiny, a more watchful eye than others. So all those things do matter. When you're recruiting a student athlete, you're recruiting everything that comes with that individual, right? And so it's important that the parents are aware that they're not doing anything to hurt. It would have to be some outlandish stuff, which does happen, you know, but I don't think they need to be as watchful or as, you know, they don't need to worry about it near as much. Just be an adult. That's most important. Not easier said than done. I know, plenty of times.
Sure. Just a few more questions. I certainly appreciate your time and I'll keep watching the chat. But last kind of piece is the age or kind of level of the player when they start setting up their, you know, personal brand or start this recruiting process. Should the athlete, if they're wanting to play in college, should they wait until they're on varsity? Should they wait until they're a junior, a senior? When really should they really get involved in this process on social media or they're in their setting up their personal brand?
Well, it's never too early to set up your personal brand, but when recruiting becomes a part of it, will be whenever you're at the varsity level, competing at the varsity level. There's not going to be coaches that are going to watch your freshman or your JV film unless you're an elite level athlete already identified. That as again, I'll use football as an example. As a freshman offensive lineman, if you're 6'7", 300 pounds, and you move exceptionally well, and you got great flexibility and bend and explosiveness coming out of a stance, and all those things as a freshman, absolutely, that's pretty rare. It's never too early to build your brand. Understand that varsity film is what college coaches are going to watch. You're not going to entertain a JV film. There's no sense in that because the competition just isn't going to equate to a solid evaluation. But when you're building your brand, even if it's at a younger age, be mindful, have some humility to it. There's too many people out there that think the baby Gronk deal is okay, and it's not. But it's good for them. They've gotten a lot of awareness out of that social media account. But that's not the ideal way to capture positive attention from a lot of college coaches. And be understanding of the fact that you can start building your brand at whatever age and make sure that it's an appropriate brand that you're building. And ideally, the younger you are, the more your parents are involved, and the coaches. But understand that the film and the stuff that you put out, it's not going to get evaluated or watched until you get to the varsity level.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I think that was the last question I had for you. Did you have any final, notes or remarks you wanted to, close out with before we wrap things up?
No, I think that was it. Again, I'm going to reemphasize my opening line. You never get a second opportunity for a first impression is not true in recruiting when you're talking about social media. So make sure that your first impression through social media matches your first impression face to face, and you get a great opportunity for success.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Justin, for being on this webinar today. For those who stuck around, we will have this webinar sent out sometime early next week. So keep a lookout for that. It'll be available on YouTube as well as our webinar page. It's BSN Sports _BSN webinars. So stay on the lookout for that. Also, this is part 2 of a 3-part recruiting webinar series. So if you like today's content, we do have a previous one and we do have an upcoming one as well. So we'll keep you updated on that. But again, thank you to everyone who joined today. And again, a big thank you to you, Justin, for sharing your knowledge on this topic.
Thank you all.
Awesome. Have a great rest of your week, everyone. Bye-bye.